Okay, my friends, today we are taking a look at the Hull C. This is a ship that has taken a good long while. In fact, for those of you who have been around, you probably remember seeing it in an engine all the way back in 2017. Like, this is one of the longest development ships in Star Citizen, because it got from concept to actually in engine. It didn't take very long. Relatively speaking, it took as long as a normal game might, but in terms of Star Citizen time, it didn't actually take too long to get into the engine. But we didn't get our hands on it for another 6 years after that. So today we're going to look at kind of the problems that they faced, the things that gave them pause, that had them hesitate on bringing them into the game, and we're gonna track their development throughout the years following these YouTube videos to see what is it that made them finally get to bring it to us. So we're going to start it here with this wiki page. The MISC Hull C is often called the most common ship in the galaxy. It's actually kind of surprising to hear. Indeed, it is the most produced ship of the Hull range and is considered by many to be the most versatile, intended to hit the sweet spot between the smaller single-person transports and the massive super freighters that made up the rest of the range. The Hull C offers the expansive modularity of the larger ships while still retaining a semblance of maneuverability. It's weird hearing something like this. It's the smaller ship. It's the primary one that people like to use because we're coming from the angle of, hey, our previous large hauler was the Starlifter, right? And this carries, like, I don't even know how much more, way more cargo. So from our perspective, this is a pretty big ship, but it is also the most common ship in the galaxy. So it's a big ship. It carries a lot of stuff, but even then, as far as the lore goes, this is the most common ship. So when the game is finally at a place where they can have spaceships flying around and AI doing stuff and trading processes going on, we're actually going to see a lot of Hull Cs out there in the verse. It carries 144 32 SCU containers, which is gnarly. And they are the minimal equipable size containers for the Raft, Hull C, Hull D, and Hull E. I don't believe that's true for the Hull C anymore, right? Because we were seeing just earlier this week in the stream that it can be carrying smaller boxes than a 32 SCU. So that needs a little update. Going down here, is going to talk a little bit about the Hull C's history and put that into perspective a little bit more, the size. So the line launched in 2802, which is about 150 years, give or take, earlier than the game takes place. 4 standard models ranged in size from the efficient Hull A, which we have in game, to the gargantuan Hull D. Now that's an important distinction there. The actual range of ships only went from the Hull A to the Hull D. The Hull series quickly revolutionized interstellar freight, leading to the standardization of dockyards and cargo processes around the UEE. This led to long-ranging knock-on effects, including over a dozen outside companies being founded or significantly shifting focus to support the Hull design, such as Argo Astronautics launching its MPUV line of short-range cargo ferries. So that's a key ship when it comes to that is a key ship when it comes to the Hull series. The Argo MPUV is definitely the kind of thing that is going to probably play a big part in the larger cargo hauling jobs that people are taking when it comes to the large Hull series ships. And we've seen them a couple times in like little videos here and there. I think one of the key moments was when they were like dragging a derelict Javelin with their tractor beams. But overall, the MPUV will be pretty important for this kind of stuff. And 150 years is not a long time in the grand scheme of things. So very recently, when it comes to the lore, everything kind of got updated to handle Hull Cs and Hull Ds and like these bigger cargo ships. In 2820, MISC developed a 5th super freighter called the Hull E, which has since become the de facto interplanetary bulk goods transporter, with docks around the galaxy moving cargo containers back and forth from the huge ships around the clock. So the Hull C was the go-to at first. The Hull D was the large version of the Hull C. The Hull E was brought in completely as a separate kind of extra large ship. So the way that they're established is you have the Hull A, and the Hull B is like the large version of the Hull A. Then you have the Hull C, with the Hull D being the large version of the Hull C. And then you have the Hull B, the Hull E being a standalone kind of thing. And I don't remember where I read it, but the Hull E is meant to have a slightly different design because of that, to be seen as a different sort of ship. Can the Hull carry an MPUV? That's a good question. I think we'll be finding that in this Q&A, which is our next stop. Thank you for that nice segue, Rustbeard. So there's not too many questions in here I think are all that interesting. First one says, would some of the third-party add-ons for the spindle accommodate cargo not in a container? So I think that's what you were asking about fuel, because they did mention something here about additions that you could add on. Example, if you'd like to use the Hull C to carry salvage transferred directly from a reclaimer in space without needing to wait for the reclaimer to land and dock every time its hold is full. Man, these are old questions, right? That would be kind of a given for us at this point. We would just assume you could just throw the boxes on there. But then again, you'd have to find a way to load those boxes from the reclaimer into a 32 SCU box. I didn't even consider that. If you're transporting stuff in a bunch of smaller boxes, are we going to just be able to easily transfer them all to larger boxes for this stuff? Well, the answer is a case like this would require a special container that can open during flight. We're working on developing exactly this, both for ore transfers on the smaller ships and so that fighters can be stored and constructed from parts on the larger models. It sounds like they were talking about fighters being stored, but I don't know if they'd still stick with that. That would be heftily powerful to have a whole E or D as like just a ship transport. Maybe the reclaimer can compact salvage into the size and shape of store-all boxes, which can then be ejected and fastened to the Hull C spindle. Huh, fancy that. They answered, in all likelihood, you would need some kind of basket container for actually carrying the salvage. But know that Hull C series is intended to be fully modular in the Star Citizen world. Modular in the Star Citizen world is a little bit of a caveat attached to it, allowing crews to work in tandem with all the other game's other working ships. This is a very old Q&A, 2015. This is all conceptual talk. They hadn't even started like actual game design. So a lot of these answers are probably not going to be super helpful, but we'll continue. Yeah, this was actually a really cool concept, having the stairs be attached to that front landing strut. But you can just see how much the design of ships has changed since this. I mean, this is a 10-year-old concept picture at this point. This one wasn't super interesting. Internal cargo, we know that to be true. The center spine on the C, D, and E, is it large enough to have crew walk through it? And for that matter, is it hollow? We look back at these questions and we're like, duh. But back then, nobody really knew. The answer was yes. We're still working out the details, but it should be large enough to walk through on the Hull D and E. Ho-ho! So they didn't even have the C planned for that. And large enough to crawl through on the Hull C. So the ships got bigger since then, for sure, and you can now walk through it on the Hull C. In all of these ships, it will be advantageous for an engineer to be able to reach the drive unit on occasion. As we saw with our last little tour of the Hull C, there is a spot for engineers in the back there. How likely will running a Hull C without escort go for the owner? Answer being, this will depend on what you're up against. We expect Hull C will make safe sector transit without escort quite handily, and that they will have the speed and weapons to fend off some attacks traveling towards the frontier. So, safe sector escort would be like probably Crusader to R-Corp, maybe like Lorville to R-Corp, something like that. Frontier obviously being more like Pyro. So, this is really important to the whole idea of Hull C and large cargo shipping, because part of the risk of shipping so much stuff in one spot is that it's easy to get attacked all at once. And while you can make a ton of profit with a ship like a Hull C, there has to be a lot of trade-off in terms of the risk. So there's going to be a lot of balance, I think, that has to go into the whole quantum simulation and the missions that they provide to make sure that running with a ship like this is both interesting, worth your money, and worth your time, but also comes with a lot of the risk and fear of getting attacked. But then it comes down to the pirates to go and exfiltrate 144 32 SCU boxes. Like, you're going to have to set up a whole cargo operation if you're pirating one of these ships. It's pretty wild. What do the other two crew members do? I thought this question was super interesting because it says there are 4 crew, so they didn't ask what the other 3 members do, but let's read what the answer is anyways. Additional crew members on this ship. I guess they mean like what do 2 crew members do on top of the 2 that would already be needed. The answer being additional crew members will run the turret, navigation, scanners, repair team, or whatever the captain assigns them through the multi-crew seat system. One thing to remember is that we build our ships as they should work in the game, even if some of that isn't as exciting for gameplay. An argument a lot of people have, that there is too much in this game that won't necessarily be fun, it'll just be immersive or simulative. In the Star Citizen universe, it makes sense for large transports to have crews that trade off the pilot seat during long duration runs. And we've seen this in the Hull C. They have a specific spot for the pilot, the navigator, the engineer, and captain. So there's 4 spots, right? But you also have probably need for 5 people. If you want to have 2 engineers, a pilot, a captain, that's 4 already. You might want to have 1 or 2 extra people for turrets if you're going to be flying through dangerous territory. So they have recommended crew sizes, but I think this will be a number that you assume or consider for each different run. So that is all the reading I've got for you guys today. Luckily, we don't have to do much reading. We like videos more. Now we're going to take a look at our earliest update that I know of on the ship itself. This is a solid, what, like 10 minutes, 8 minutes? Yeah, it's like 7-8 minutes of just information on the MISC Hull C back in 2017, what they were considering and what they had planned for this big cargo ship. Let's listen in.
Series as a whole is a really interesting challenge. We decided to start with the Hull C because it's the middle ground.
Upgrade our
fleet
footage.
So the Hull C is a cargo ship that we sold a long time ago. This is a ship that looks relatively simple from the exterior, but that is a ship that is collapsing on itself and can deploy as well, that is supposed to land and support a lot of cargo.
When it's in its cargo mode, it basically has long struts that can fold out and the ship basically doubles in size.
So these basically fold out like a fan and you can fit a ton of cargo on there as you're flying along. The only downside to that is the fact you can't land when the struts are out, obviously, because there's 4 of them and you'd need like...
I can't help but notice all the roads in the background of this picture. Just makes it just like, kind of reminds me of like Nevada. The areas connecting Los Angeles to Las Vegas look a lot like this. Just long roads going through the desert, which, and you know, obviously a lot of other places on Earth, but makes me think of road trips. Wonder to myself, why y'all driving? Get a spaceship.
Ridiculously long landing gear otherwise.
If you have some cargo and want to connect to a station, at some point it will be possible to connect with a docking collar. You can take containers from a station, from planets as well, obviously, and then you can go to different parts of the galaxy or of the solar system to sell your stuff. The issue with this ship is that at first, when we sold it, we've shown some animation of it collapsing on itself. This is one of the most complex parts of any ship in the game right now. The cargo spindle in the middle, this is supposed to deploy in a specific way.
We're going to be hearing about that in almost every video that talks about this ship. That transformation of the cargo spindle, the folding out, the physics grids, all that was ridiculously difficult for them to get working. Actually, the person who finished up the design of this ship spent like 3 years, the last 3 years, working with different teams to try and get this model to work in game. Really complicated ship.
It presented its subset of challenges of, really, we've got this moving ship that can kind of move on itself, right? So we've never done that before, so that's kind of kicked off a whole sprint to obviously kind of make that possible. You have to move Viseras, you have to move lighting, you have to move collision dynamically in the ship. So that's incredibly challenging to do, but it's going to serve its purpose because then that's enabled us to do stuff on the Pioneer, which we wanted to do, right? So we're always thinking about this stuff as we're doing it. We're not doing it just for one.
For those who don't know, the Pioneer is a ship that builds outposts. We haven't really heard about that much since then. Probably a good thing, because they just shouldn't bring that up until they're ready to start letting us build ships.
one ship. Does that make sense?
We have what we call physics read. Until now, we never had interior physics reads that were moving into each other. With this animation, it meant that everything was going inside and there was only the room for 2 people at the front of the ship and nothing else at all. So we had some room at least to have like some beds and some place to live, some place to go outside, but also some place to put the components. Like if you have some mechanical issue in space, you can still work on the engine, work on the gravity generator and other parts like this. Once this was done, obviously the ship got bigger, and once the ship got bigger, we had to ask ourselves some questions like, do we put some stairs like we planned at the start? Do we put a lift? Do we put different parts? And so we tried different layout. Most importantly, we had to make a layout that will work for other ships in the series. On top of that, this is a cargo ship. This is a space truck, basically. It's not a ship that you can really defend yourself with. You have some remote turrets, you have some guns at the front, but you need to plan an escort to go through the universe without any issues.
That is like the ultimate test. Take this thing into Arena Commander. Dogfighting with the Hull C. If you can do that, you are leading security division in GII.
When you look at it, it looks like a MISC ship. Like, you know, that's kind of, you know, the sort of primary goal of the ship guys, to make sure it sort of gels with the other ships in that manufacturer.
An escort.
So, you know, when you see it flying along, you know it's a MISC ship, and, you know, it's got this kind of stuff inside it, and, you know, you sort of know how to use it, kind of thing. Graham's.
Look at that. They were flying this thing around in their own builds 6 years ago. I remember seeing that and I was like, oh man, guess we'll be getting that soon. Ha! 6 years earlier, Space Tomato. You're funny.
Got this kind of stuff inside it, and, you know, you sort of know how to use it, kind of thing. Graham's done a really nice job on the exterior as well. Like the struts on the arms are crazy complicated to do. Like the mechanism for that is really insane. So yeah, in the interior for the Hull C, like I quite like the sort of engine room at the back, just because it sort of gave me the rear portion of the ship doesn't have it didn't have any concepts or anything. So I basically took the shape that Graham had sort of carved out from the exterior, and it put some like crazy 3-tier engine bay in it, which you know, it looks quite interesting.
Beautiful.
The bottom area is just sort of arc gubbins, effectively. So you've got these large kind of pulses that go to the engines, and then you've got a sort of lift that takes you to a component floor with, you know, power, shields, gravity generator, and all that sort of stuff. And then the top floor is just like an external sort of airlock out to the back of the ship, with a little sort of like viewing area that you can stand on if you need to check the engines and stuff. But yeah, that was it got considerably larger than the like the designer's block out was like a tiny little box for the back of the ship, and I managed to wrangle some, you know.
Oh my god, that was tiny. Look at that. Looks like a little skeleton version of what it is now.
Massive 3-tier sort of area. So yeah, push it as far as you can. But luckily I had sort of Nate's art direction to sort of pull me back a bit, because I quite like colour, so I was sort of throwing in a lot of very heavy colours, and he was just like, you know, calm it down, which was quite nice.
It's got a lot of cool things about it. I my personal favourite thing about the whole ship is there's the habitational area on the top of the front of the ship, and the guys have put in this wicked little kind of slat window that outlooks into the folding arms section, so you can kind of sit there, and when the ship deploys, you can just appreciate this beautiful kind of unfolding, slow, deliberate kind of movement to it, almost kind of like 2001 rotation. Does that make sense? That is incredibly cool to look at, and I think it's going to be very cool to see people kind of latching on cargo and stuff onto those arms from that window in specific.
You can feel a lot of MISC intentions in the ship. This is older, but this is still a MISC ship.
The MISC style itself is very kind of clean and clinical in that respect. Like the walls don't have any of the, you know, the fluffy pads or pillows and stuff that the like Retaliator and stuff has.
We already had a very established kind of style between the Freelancer and the Starfarer, so it's really kind of taking that that, should we say, that that foundation from those ships and really kind of build upon it. So the development cycle is fairly kind of painless now with MISC ships. It's we can kind of, you know, they come in and we're pretty efficient on the production side of actually developing them.
When I'm making a ship, I just try and look at all the other ships in the range and then just try and take design cues from each of them and fit it together so that they all look like they've all come from the same factory, basically, or they at least had the same designers on them.
He said the development of a MISC ship is pretty straightforward from there, except for the whole series. Man, these ships, like, just looking back on it and realizing 6 years has passed. Whew.
The Hull C has completed the final modeling and surfacing stage of final art and is now being tended to by multiple teams working on animations, UI, audio, and tech art. Once work on the ship is complete, the resources and practices learned here will be applied to the other 4 variants of the Hull lineup. Just thinking about it brings a smile to my face. Trust me, it's there, under all this hair.
So at that point, 2017, like he said, they were working on it. Tech art, final art, flight prep was getting going. And then they realized it wasn't going to work. And that's where we get to the next video, where we start asking more questions. That is actually 3 years later. So there's a pretty big gap here of stuff that I couldn't really find talk about the Hull C between 2017 and 2020. But generally, this video will still catch up on kind of what was going on with the ship and why it was taking a while longer at that point. Yeah, around the verse, that was back in the day. That was before they changed it up and made Star Citizen Live. They were doing, Inside Star Citizen, they were doing like 4 or 5 shows a week at that point. We were getting Bug Smashers, Around the Verse, Calling All Devs. What else were we getting? Nope, can't remember it. But we were getting quite a few different things going on pretty regularly back then. Obviously, because they were more about sharing the info than making the game. And as time went on, they started to get more and more people that were dedicated to kind of making the game and putting the teams together, and less about the marketing kind of stuff. Even though we all can see that marketing still has a pretty heavy hand.
We know that work was paused on it some time ago because it was waiting for other ship-related tech like the expandable, collapsible physics grids. I look at the ship-to-station docking and I see similarities there. Are we getting closer to making this thing a reality?
We are. Like you say, the ship-to-station docking required animatable and multiple physics grids, which is what the Hull C requires. So we now have those. So that's one thing ticked off the list of Hull C dependencies. We still have a few more that we need to solve before we can release the ship, but we are able to actually progress internally now a bit more with it. Okay. So we need the ability for rooms to scale like physics areas, because now you can have gravity in that central spine, but there'll be no air. So it's sort of equally as problematic for release.
Okay.
And that also help all the level designers and the vehicle designers, because we want to unify the way all the rooms and shapes are made in the engine. At the moment, they're all sort of individual shapes. So design has to go in and mark up a room for the air. An audio design has to go in and mark up a room for the audio volume. Art have to go in and mark up a room for vis areas and portals to stop light coming in. So you want to all put them into one single feature that can support scaling, and then bam, that's the Hull C part solved. The 2 other bits needed are a way to nicely trigger state machines on vehicles. So we sort of fudge it together at the moment by tying state changes into the landing gear deployments. We need to split that out. That's scheduled for one of the vehicle teams. And then the last one is really the cargo system. It obviously carries thousands of units of cargo, and we only supply cargo in 1 SEU boxes at the moment. And that system needs to support not doing that. It needs to go, right, you've bought 4,000 units of Laranite, and here's 100 big boxes of it, or because it will just cripple server performance. We've seen what happens when people go wild with Picos. This would be a whole lot worse than that.
And it's one of those things where the upcoming cargo decks in 3.11, while not the functionality it's in 3.11, but the cargo decks themselves are a platform for additional features, and where those will tie into being able to offload things like the Hull C and maybe even load them up to begin with. So,
they're the perfectly designed places for that, because you don't want to take your Hull C. Well, you can't land with the cargo out, so there's very little point taking it down to the surface to land, but you will need to drop these off at orbital stations.
Right. So a lot of good progress being made. It's exciting to hear. It's exciting to hear about things like the physicalized armor and the armor penetration and the SDF shields and the 2 different versions of ship docking. All in active development. We hear so often about dependencies, and this has to wait for this. But to know that these things are actually in active motion now. The HUD styling for Aegis, another big thing. It's another big part of making these ships feel different and unique and bespoke. Lots of exciting stuff.
Bespoke. Okay, so that was kind of the info on the Hull C there. So he mentioned that they needed to do. Let's see, what was it? They needed to do the collapsing physics grids, keeping that central area able to have oxygen and gravity and not get mixed up with the cargo areas on the outside of it. They got that check done. That was like the last big thing I think they came up with just now over the summer, over this last year or so. He mentioned that they needed to have the right size cargo boxes working as well, which again is something that has come in with 3.20 or was in testing in 3.20 PTU. And what was the last thing he said?
Here's 100 big boxes of it. Or
that was the last thing. What was
the cargo system? It obviously carries thousands of units of cargo, and we only supply cargo in 1 SEU boxes at the moment. The 2 other bits needed are a way to nicely trigger state machines on vehicles.
Right.
So,
being able to change the state of a ship at the press of a button. And we've seen that. The magical K button. First, they started to disconnect. Sorry, that was it's not a very pleasing place to pause. First, we needed to be able to disconnect the landing gear from the state of the ship, which they got that, I think it was maybe last year or the year before. And then more recently, the kind of VTOL thrusters being able to change on their own and the state of different ships having like a transformation mode. All of that has come in the last year. So it does make sense that we're starting to see now the Hull C come together with all of those things being fixed. That the last part that was probably really important was the economy changes, but he actually didn't mention that in this one. What I do want to hear about is they mentioned, could have sworn they mentioned physicalized damage somewhere here. We won't get too tangented by that though. All right, so here is another update on the Hull series. This one actually includes a little look at the Hull A, because that was the next ship that was coming out at the time. This is summer of 2021, so another chance for them to talk a little bit about what they're doing with the Hull C, but this is after they've already acknowledged the problems they're running into, the things they need to get done, and I believe this is at the time when they have started to tackle those problems, and they're seeing docking working, they're seeing the Hull A coming in, they're realizing that these problems are getting solved, so they started to go back and update the Hull C again. Remember, we saw it in engine, we saw all that design stuff. Clearly they had done a lot of the artwork in 2017 and 2018, but they needed to go back and update it again. So here's where they start, leading off with the Hull A.
Gray Box, let's go back to White Box, where I'm proud to announce work has begun on building out the Hull A, entry-level variant of the famed Hull C from Musashi Industrial and Starflight Concern. Now in White Box phase, this process began by importing the recently revised 3D concept mesh into engine and ensuring that it itself is functional. Now you might be saying, recently revised concept? Yeah, some minor changes had to be made because player and ship metrics have evolved quite a bit since it was first introduced, and important studies have shown players like to fit inside their spaceships. On the inside, in its collapsed state, it's looking very similar to the size of the Prospector players are already familiar with, complete with a cockpit in front, a component area just behind, an airlock, and then habitation in the rear of the front half. And as White Box work continues, the team will be evaluating space for the various components, as well as a potential reduction in CST. That's cockpit struck thickness, a malady that can strike any MISC or RSI ship at a moment's notice. And one origin ship. But we fixed that. There's also a re-examination of bathroom space going on as AI NPC passengers need just a little more room to do things than players. Yeah. Eventually, pooping AI will be on the roadmap. You can bug Jake Bradley for the win.
AI poop.
White box phase is also where we test things like landing gear position so the ship doesn't fall over, which is extra special important with the Hull A because of its expanding and contracting substructure, where timings are being adjusted and especially the clearances, because the Hull A is intended to successfully make landing both collapsed and with its cargo racks fully extended and filled.
And
But
then,
Disco, what about my Hull C?
Yeah.
Well, the team has also brought the original beast out of the mothballs it's been sitting in for a while and begun to update it to modern vehicle art standards, including an updated thruster trim sheet. Nice. New headlights up front. Nice. And crucially, upgrading the materials all over with the recent hard surface shader in a comparison you can see here.
no, I don't know.
Recent
I'm almost tempted to say that the old one at least looks more like industrial,
hard surface shader in a comparison.
but I don't know, maybe not. It's got like that really sheet metal look to it, whereas the new one looks a little bit untextured. But again, that was before. I need to go back and check how it is in game now. But I did like that old version, especially that side trim. Looked pretty cool. Maybe it looks better in gray than blue,
In
though.
a comparison you can see here. May we never speak of the Ilum shader ever again. They've also gone back and added VTOL thrusters, missing from when the ship was last worked on, because while it won't be able to land fully laden like its Hull A little sibling, you can still expect to do so in its collapsed state.
So that's something confirmed from that stream that we had earlier this week. The VTOL was able to keep the ship up by itself, whereas without the VTOL, it would sink down below. So confirmed from the mouths of CIG themselves.
Inside the ship, work continues making many of the same types of upgrades to materials, signage, and general scale, including cutaways for many of the new components that have been developed since the Hull C was last worked on. Finally, Olisar is moving.
All right, so that was the end of that Hull C update. And we are on to... this was during a video about the Odyssey, which, gosh, I can't wait for the Odyssey. How about we take a little bit of a look at the Odyssey before we start with the Hull C here. More of an update, though, on the Hull C, headed towards production, final art, and all that jazz. Let's listen in.
The natural competitor to the Odyssey is the Carrot.
In my mind, it's a carrot killer.
God, look at that thing. Oh, it looks so good. I wasn't crazy about this ship at first, but it really grew on me, and I get so much like just Prometheus vibe from it. Also, I'm pretty sure we were just about to hear him say carrot killer. That is such a cursed phrase.
The natural competitor to the Odyssey is the Carrot.
In my mind, it's a carrot killer. What you can do with it is pretty impressive. It's kind of the multi-tool of the spaceship world.
It just gives you almost ultimate flexibility on how you want to play. The MISC Odyssey is the ultimate exploration ship.
The MISC
Until the next exploration ship comes out.
Odyssey is the first offering from the storied manufacturer in quite some time, and they seem intent on bursting back into the scene with a massive impact that is sure to make Carrack owners look twice. And while that wraps up our multi-week coverage of the new ships and vehicles of this year's Intergalactic Aerospace Expo, let's go ahead and take a look into the future with a special vehicle-themed sprint report. To get things started, members of the EU Vehicle Content Team have
Starting with
returned
the Hull
their
A again.
attentions to the Hull A and Hull C as they continue refining the work previously done in order to bring it up to current standards and, perhaps most importantly, metrics. Now, if you've been following the project for some time, you'll know we learn with each and every ship we make, and it's essential to take those lessons forward so they can inform each and every ship yet to come. Now, while the Hull A continues its journey through Final Art exterior and gray box interior, what you can see here with the Hull C are the results of not just some recent lighting passes, but an effort to update the interior scales of certain areas for improved player and NPC comfort alike, addressing those metric issues and experimenting with some early attempts at new building block screens for tractor beams and the like. And speaking of tractor beams, the vehicle content team has begun building the size 1, 2, and 3 tractor beams that can be equipped to a variety of vehicles, bringing with it some long-awaited functionality to ships like the 300 seen here, the Caterpillar, and more. Minor updates are...
Man, I cannot wait for tractor beams to come into the game. There are supposed to be a few on the Hull C as well. And that wasn't a huge update on the Hull C there, just some art assets and stuff, but they were continuing along with it. So another update to the Hull C here. We're getting pretty close now. This is less than a year ago. See what they have to say.
And finally, before we let you go this week, let's go deep inside the Hull C and take a nice long look at its current interior.
To be honest, there weren't that many changes between all these
the
videos.
development history of the Hull C will already know that it began its journey through the ship pipeline quite some time ago, before it was eventually moved to the backlog until much needed technologies could be built. When it came time to pull it out of mothballs and start up again, many aspects of the shipbuilding pipeline had continued to evolve, along with the visual expectations of everyone involved. So while work on the upcoming cargo refactor continues, members of the EU vehicle content team have been gently bringing the Hull C up to modern Star Citizen standards. This includes work on new tractor beam and remote camera UI being developed with, I'm sure you've probably guessed it, the ever-popular building blocks tech, which will allow players to successfully operate this unique addition to the persistent universe.
See, now that's kind of a bummer because we're not getting that tractor beam UI with the Hull C. It might be coming in the next update to follow, but we still haven't even seen it. So I'm hoping we can get an update on tractor beams in the following update after 3.20 and not some further update after that. Do I think the Hull C in game, with the Hull C in game and the big backlog of ships, that we won't see the Hull B, D, or E for a while? Maybe the B and the D. I think the E is going to be a while out, though.
And while its smaller sibling, the diminutive Hull A, is scheduled to arrive before it in the upcoming Alpha 317, we'll continue to check in on this economy-altering vehicle as it continues its long journey from concept to completion. So what did we learn this week?
That the Hull C was still a whale away. This is the last update we got where they kind of review all of the stuff we just watched and talk about why it took so long and what they want to do with it.
An update on a ship that's finally making its long-awaited debut in the upcoming Alpha 320, the Hull C from Musashi Industrial. Hey, John Crew, are you there?
Hello.
How you doing, man?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Good. The Hull C.
Yep.
This thing's been in development for a while. What's been going on, man?
Well, how long have you got?
Try to keep it under 2 minutes.
Okay. Hull C, for those
We've already been here for a while, you know?
who don't know, is like the big 18-wheeler of the Star Citizen universe, designed for transporting bulk cargo around the stations and between solar systems. We started it, I want to say 5+ years ago. We got so far on the art and design side, probably early grey box. And then the sheer amount of technical challenges with this ship became apparent. We put a pause to it. I thought, we'll come back. The teams that need to help us have more important things to do at that point in time. There was object container streaming going on. So we're like, that's more important. We'll sort that out. We'll come back to it. And the last year or so, we've come back to it and had to deal with all those big technical challenges for the ship.
And how's it doing today? What can folks expect?
You can expect the ship working as we intended it to be when it was concepted. So it's quite a unique ship in the game. There's a lot of moving parts literally on it and some tech in there that you've never seen before in any ships. So primarily the hurdles revolved around that central spindle section that you can walk through whilst it's doing those animated states. We've essentially got two parts of the ship that move independent, or they're animated together, but they're independent parts of the ship, and a new way of loading cargo onto the ship.
I want to talk to you about that. So one of the big questions since this thing was first introduced is how the cargo loading and unloading is going to work in Alpha 320. Who can tell us about that?
I think we can probably get Chris Tanks on the line. Oh, excuse me. Sorry, Jared. Excuse me. Hi.
Hi, Chris Tanks.
Hi, Jared.
So how does cargo work for the Hull C in Alpha 320?
So in Alpha 320, the Hull C behaves as we expect it to. When it's extended, when its cargo arms are out, it can't land. So it can't take cargo in the normal sense that any other ship that takes cargo does while it's landed. So you go to your cargo terminal, you buy as much cargo as you want, you set it to the Hull C, but the system recognizes that it can't spawn the cargo while the ship is landed. So you get in your ship, you fly it out of the hangar, and then contact ACC again. That is when the ship realizes, oh, I'm out of the landing zone now, I'm ready to take some cargo. So you extend it, contact the ATC, and the cargo will spawn on your ship then.
Okay, somebody answer this for me. Why doesn't it allow you to load the stuff when you dock to the station? Why do you have to fly out to a separate place? I think that's what kind of confuses me. Like, why can't I extend the cargo grid, dock it to the station, and then load cargo onto it? Because there's only 2 docks? Well, why not just be like, hey, the docks are full, just to keep from hogging the docking ports? Man, I don't like that. Really? That's why? I mean, we don't even have that many ships that dock to the stations right now. Yeah, why don't the cargo decks just have docking ports specifically for loading cargo? I mean, we made all of the cargo decks 3 years ago, right? As an anticipation for this gameplay. Why make the cargo decks if they're not gonna... All right.
Does this thing fit in any hangars?
While it's collapsed, it'll fit in the large spec hangars. When it's extended, it doesn't fit in any hangar we have at the moment.
You can dock it though.
It can be docked at any station.
Has anybody tried to dock it when it's fully extended?
Oh, I mean, you would hit the extent of the cargo long before your landing gear touched the ground. It would not be pretty.
What do we...
Well, I mean, somebody will have done it, and it will have been a magnificent explosion, but I wouldn't recommend it.
All right, so we've been looking at images of the new Hull C. It looks fantastic. Which one of you is going to talk about how it looks?
Probably Ben.
You don't have Ben back here, do you?
Hello.
Take a seat, Ben.
Hello, Jared. How are you?
There's no way they're letting me do
Just
this.
pops up right in front of the camera.
Ben, talk us through it. The Hull C looks great. It's been a while getting there.
Yep.
Tell us about it.
So as John mentioned, it's been in development for a while. We kind of stepped on it and stepped off it, depending on what tech we needed. I think, in our game we talk a lot about kind of gold standard, but really with the Hull C, it's kind of like current standard. So what we want to do is make sure that when we release the ship visually, it ticked all of our kind of current processes, and it kind of really was on par with everything else that we put out now compared to where it was kind of back in the day. I think some of the other kind of updates we've had to do to kind of maintain it over the years is just the kind of like the simple things like we now have a lot more interaction in the ships, which we never had back when it was first started. So making sure all the panels are accessible and open and close and animate, making sure the dashboard's all interactive and all those fun things that everyone's used to now.
What are some of your favorite parts? What are things that people should look out for visually?
I think, to be honest, the ship is a very industrial ship, and it really kind of feels that way. There's some like little things that I just love, like the main kind of airlock entrance into the ship feels really big and chunky and strong, which I think is needed on something so industrial. And that kind of industrial language kind of flows throughout the ship. I think my kind of main favourite place is engineering in the rear. The whole rear of the ship is kind of dedicated to really encompassing that idea that you are on a big workhorse. You know, there's big engines, there's massive pipes. It feels really kind of like nice and moody and a little bit dangerous. And I think that's kind of really helps sell what's going on the outside of the ship, but inside.
Well, that all sounds great. So, what did we learn this week?
That we should have been able to dock the ship to load the cargo, but we can't. That actually is kind of a bummer. Like, I really wish that we could just be on the docking port and not have to do the whole fly out into the middle of space in order to load the ships.